every rhyme was like the best shit I ever heard in my life.
And of course, NAS are the letters that spell.
It was dark. It was really dark. Like, you know, there was a lot of drinking. There was a lot of just mental and physical abuse.
She had been abused by Nas, and she had alleged that they had an abusive relationship. And she made the connection to being in her home bruised and beaten like Rihanna.
It was really toxic, and I was pregnant. And so at 7 months pregnant, I was terrified. I was like, I cannot bring a person into this. This is a freaking mess.
Nas has finally opened up on allegations that shook the hip-hop world. Accusations of hitting his wife while cameras captured a side of him most fans never imagined existed. After years of silence, the truth about what really happened between one of rap's greatest poets and the woman he married is spilling into public view, piece by ugly piece. The man who gave us Illmatic, who painted Queensbridge with vivid street poetry, now finds himself painted as something far darker. His legacy, once untouchable, now carries a stain that won't wash away. But what really went down behind closed doors? Why did it take nearly a decade for these allegations to surface? In April 2018, Khalees Rogers sat down with Hollywood Unlocked and dropped a bomb that would change how people saw Nas forever. She described their marriage as really toxic and made claims that cut deep. This wasn't a vague insinuation or a carefully worded statement designed to avoid legal trouble. This was direct, unfiltered, and impossible to misinterpret. When asked directly if he hit her, she answered with a simple sound, affirmative and chilling. She claimed there were bruises all over her body, marks left behind from a man who, she says, would black out from drinking and wake up the next morning with no memory of what he'd done the night before. The details painted a horrifying picture of cyclical violence, alcohol-fueled rage, and convenient amnesia. It was a pattern that, if true, suggested deep dysfunction and denial. She said watching Rihanna's bruised face on television in 2009 after Chris Brown's assault became the moment she recognized her own situation. She admitted she also had bruises all over her body and felt embarrassed. The comparison was devastating. In one interview, Khalees had linked Nas to one of the most infamous domestic violence cases in modern celebrity history. The parallel was intentional, calculated to make people understand the severity of what she claims happened. But there was a twist. When pressed about the violence, she said something unexpected. Did he hit me? Yes. Did I hit him back? Yes. That admission of mutual combat muddied the narrative, though abuse experts quickly pointed out that hitting back in self-defense is very different from being the aggressor. The reaction was swift and brutal. Social media erupted. Fans who had spent decades defending Nas suddenly found themselves questioning everything. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. How could the man who wrote I Can and Daughters be accused of this? How could the poet who told kids to stay in school be linked to domestic violence? But Khalees wasn't done. She revealed more context, claiming the violence was tied to Nas's drinking. The alcohol transformed him into someone she didn't recognize. The pattern she described, blackouts followed by denial, is textbook substance-related aggression. If you're shocked by what you're hearing, you're not alone. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this rabbit hole goes deep and you won't want to miss what comes next. Nas didn't stay silent for long. In September 2018, 5 months after Khalees' interview, he fired back with a 7-part essay posted on Instagram. His response was aggressive and defensive. He opened with a categorical denial, stating flatly that he does not beat women and did not beat up his ex-wife. But then came the line that made everything worse. "Stop," he wrote. "You got beat up in court." That pivot, that attempt to reframe her bruises as legal defeats rather than physical trauma, was seen by many as textbook gaslighting. It was a rhetorical sleight of hand, redirecting the conversation from her body to courtroom outcomes. He was essentially saying her injuries weren't on her body, but in the custody rulings that went against her. Critics jumped on that line, pointing out that it completely avoided addressing the specific allegation. Instead, Nas positioned himself as the real victim, a father fighting for his rights against a hostile and jealous ex-wife. He accused her of running a smear campaign because he'd successfully sued for joint custody. He tried to flip the script entirely, but the damage was done. The open letter only deepened suspicions for many observers. The domestic violence allegations were just the latest explosion in a custody war that had been building for years. This was trench warfare fought in courtrooms across state lines and eventually across continents. In early 2019, Nas filed documents accusing Khalees of contempt of of court, claiming she'd violated their custody agreement 17 separate times. 17. That's not a disagreement. That's a pattern. That's systematic defiance of court orders, repeated over and over until it becomes clear someone has no intention of following the rules. Nas claimed Kellys had removed their son Knight from his private school without permission and taken him to Columbia. She allegedly planned to move there permanently with her new husband to start farming. For Nas, this was kidnapping dressed up as relocation. He asked the court to find her in contempt, a quasi-criminal ruling that in California can actually result in jail time. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. While Nas fought the Columbia move, Kellys was playing a longer game. By 2024, she successfully relocated, not to South America, but to East Africa. She established a 300-acre farm in Kenya's Rift Valley and brought Knight with her. Reports indicate Knight, now around 16 years old, lives in Kenya and has even joined the Kenyan national swimming team. Kellys has publicly praised Kenya's infrastructure and safety, framing it as a superior environment for raising black boys. But the financial litigation never stopped. In late 2024, Kellys filed for an increase in child support, arguing the existing $8,000 per month was insufficient. Nas was forced to file mandatory income declarations, and what those documents revealed was stunning. His monthly income now sits around $175,000. More shockingly, he disclosed approximately $8.3 million in cash assets. These numbers represent an incredible financial turnaround for a man who once faced complete ruin. To understand how remarkable their recovery is, you have to go back to 2009, the year everything fell apart simultaneously. Kellys filed for divorce in April of that year, and the timing couldn't have been more brutal. She was 7 months pregnant with Knight. The optics were catastrophic for Nas, a man already struggling with public perception and now abandoning his pregnant wife. In July 2009, just one day after Knight was born, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Louis Meisinger dropped a ruling that shocked the hip-hop industry. Nas was ordered to pay nearly $44,000 per month in combined support, about $30,000 in spousal support, $13,000 in child support. Nas was also ordered to immediately pay $45,000 to cover Kellys' legal fees and the cost of a forensic accountant. When a judge orders a forensic accountant in a divorce case, it means they suspect the stated income doesn't match the actual lifestyle. For Nas, this was particularly dangerous because at that exact moment, he was completely insolvent. The tax crisis was the silent killer. By 2012, reports confirmed Nas owed approximately $6 million in unpaid taxes to both federal and state authorities. $6 million. That's not forgetting to file. That's years of neglect or intentional avoidance. The kind of debt that destroys careers and sends people to prison. The breakdown was brutal. To the state of Georgia alone, he owed more than $425,000 just for the 2007 tax year. That figure included the principal tax, a $60,000 penalty, $57,000 in interest, and a steep collection fee of nearly $71,000. But the federal debt was far worse. The IRS filed liens against his property, and reports surfaced that Nas was on a "you're going to jail" list. That means the IRS was seriously considering criminal prosecution for tax evasion. The timing created a perfect trap. Nas was legally required to pay over $500,000 annually to Kellys, while simultaneously needing to pay down a $6 million tax debt to stay out of federal prison. How do you survive that? You tour until your body breaks, and you write music that doubles as legal testimony. In 2012, Nas released Life is Good, an album that functions as a public deposition about his divorce and money troubles. The cover art showed Nas sitting in a VIP lounge holding a green dress over his knee. That was the actual wedding dress Kellys wore at their ceremony. She left it behind and he weaponized it. By displaying the abandoned garment, he was marking the marriage as a crime scene. The lyrics went even harder. On Bye Baby, Nas delivered a blow-by-blow account of settlement negotiations. He rapped about writing his deposition, his divorce lawyer explaining how it would end with him paying off the backside, and he clarified he meant half, not some, but half. Half of his soul, half of his heart left behind. That wasn't artistic license. That was California's community property law, which presumes all property acquired during marriage is split 50-50. The album worked. Combined with aggressive touring, it generated enough revenue that by 2016, Nas was able to write a check for $3.5 million to the IRS, settling the bulk of the federal debt. But while Nas was digging himself out of tax hell, the public still didn't know about the violence allegations. That bomb wouldn't drop for another 2 years, and when it did, it recontextualized everything. Subtly, that 2009 divorce filing while Kellis was pregnant looked different. Let's go back further to where this all started. To understand how Nas became the man capable of this chaos, you have to understand Queensbridge. Nasir Jones was raised in the Queensbridge houses, the largest public housing development in North America, 3,142 units across 96 buildings. In the 1980s, Queensbridge wasn't just poor, it was a war zone. In 1986, when Nas was 13, Queensbridge experienced more murders than any other public housing complex in New York City. This was the crack epidemic tearing through the community. A National Institute of Justice report found that over half of all homicides in New York in 1988 were drug-related, with 60% involving crack specifically. For a middle school dropout like Nas, the local economy was dominated by one industry, and it was illegal. Nas witnessed things no child should see, but one event marked him permanently. On May 23, 1992, Nas's best friend, Willie "Ill Will" Graham, was murdered outside a residence in Queensbridge. Nas was there. He watched the gunman shoot Graham 3 times in the back. When Graham fell, the shooter turned the weapon toward Nas and started squeezing the trigger. Death was inches away. Nas's younger brother, Jungle, was also present and took a bullet to the leg. Nas survived. Graham didn't. The psychological impact fits the profile of post-traumatic stress disorder seen in combat veterans. Survivor's guilt, hypervigilance, a worldview defined by imminent threat. The identity of the killer was reportedly known in the community, but the case illustrates the no-snitch culture in the projects. Witnesses stay silent. Violence goes unpunished. Nas memorialized his dead friend by founding Ill Will Records. That trauma echoes through everything that came after. The violence he witnessed became the violence he allegedly inflicted. The chaos of Queensbridge became the chaos of his personal life. The survival skills learned in the projects don't disappear when you get rich. They metastasize. Fast forward to September 2009, Nas is arrested in Henry County, Georgia for driving under the influence. The arrest report contained details that seemed damning. Officers noted his vehicle reeked of raw marijuana and claimed he had a green tongue. His pulse was elevated. Most damaging, the report alleged Nas admitted to smoking marijuana before driving. An admission like that, captured in an official police report, is usually the end of the case. Dashcam footage showed him struggling with field sobriety tests. But here's the twist. The charges were dismissed. Why? Because the toxicology report came back completely negative for all substances, including marijuana. 0. The biological evidence obliterated the officer's observations. The dismissal saved Nas from a criminal record that could have barred him from international touring. But even that victory gets complicated when viewed through the lens of the later abuse allegations. Kellis claimed Nas's violence was tied to drinking. The DUI arrest, even though dismissed, fed into that narrative. Perception matters, especially in custody battles. So where does this leave us? Nas today is 52 years old and sitting on $8 million in cash. His son is swimming for Kenya. His tax debts are paid. He's still making music, still touring, still relevant. From the outside, it looks like he won. He survived Queensbridge. He survived the murder of his best friend. He survived the IRS. He survived the divorce. He survived the allegations. But survival isn't the same as innocence, and wealth isn't the same as redemption. The allegations from Kellis remain unresolved in the court of public opinion. There was no criminal trial, just accusations and denials echoing in the void. Some people believe her, some believe him. Most don't know what to believe. What's undeniable is that Nas's life has been shaped by violence from the very beginning. The story of Nas is ultimately about what happens when unresolved trauma meets fame and money. It's about how survival skills learned in the projects can become toxic in a marriage. It's about how the legal system can be both weapon and shield. And it's about how, in America, justice often comes down to liquidity. Nas had the resources to fight back, to hire forensic accountants and custody lawyers, to write million-dollar checks to the IRS. In the end, whether you believe Nas or Kellis, says more about your own biases than it does about the truth. The real truth is probably messy and somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. What we're left with is a man who came from nothing, achieved everything, lost it all, and clawed his way back. If this story made you think, let us know in the comments. Hit subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Nas opened up, but the conversation is far from over.